Today I'm going to be attempting a traditional Nuzlocke on Pokémon Sword. I'll only be allowed to catch the first encounter on each route, and I'll make sure it's a random encounter. Gift Pokémon count, but I won't be using legendaries. Playing on set mode, and I can't use items in battle. Also, with traditional Nuzlocke rules, I'll have to nickname all of my team. Last time I played Pokémon Sword, I used Inteleon, so I'm going to pick Scorbunny this time and go for Cinderace. We nickname him Rip, and on Route 1, we run into a Scovet. I would have rathered a Rookidee here, but I'll take a Scovet. We nickname him Jerry, and head to Route 2. Our encounter here is Blipbug, which is pretty good to be honest. I'm quite happy to have a Psychic type, and a Bug type. We nickname him C. Daniel, and head to the next area. I guess Hop just wanted to rub in the fact that he found a Rookidee on Route 1. I quickly wiped the smug look off his face. He might be the champion's little brother, but he's still a mug. My next encounter is the Eevee you can get when you have a save file from Let's Go Eevee. I can't evolve it unfortunately, but it does have a Dynamax and I think it's got pretty good IVs. Nickname it Squanchy and head to the wild area for my next encounter. Electrite's a pretty good member of the team. We're going to nickname it Tammy and then do a little bit of training. We evolve our Blipbug into a Doppler and we evolve our Scorbunny into a Raboot. There's still a few encounters before the first gym, but it does slow down later. When we get to Motorstoke, we go fishing in this little spot down the bottom and we find a Magikarp. This is an excellent find, and I'm not quite at the point yet where I've banned Gyarados from my Nuzlocks, so I'm going to use it. We catch it, and we give it the nickname Flippy Nips. We catch Hop trying to do a poo on a bridge and challenge him to a battle. We honestly fight this guy about 476 times in the run, so I'm going to speed it up every time I fight him. We quickly blitz through his Wooloo and take his Grookey out pretty much straight away as well. Rick's definitely the MVP of this match, and even his final Pokemon Rookidee doesn't stand a chance. The only redeeming quality of Hop is his jacket, and considering this is set in my hometown London, I'm surprised he hasn't been robbed for it yet. Speaking of awful rivals, we've got a fight against Bede next, and I'll start with C. Daniel, since the Psychic type and the Bug type is going to be really good against this Pokemon. We start with a Struggle Bug against his Solosis and take it down to half health. Annoyingly, he uses Endeavour, bringing C. Daniel down a lot as well. We gain a little bit of health back due to leftovers, but it's not really enough. I decide to switch into Jerry, since he's a bit of a tank this early in the game. Gets hit with a Confusion, which doesn't do too much damage luckily. And the next turn, I opt for Seed Bomb, which I taught him from a TM. Watching this back, I'm not really sure why I didn't use Payback since it would have been super effective, but Seed Bomb managed to take it out anyway. His next Pokemon's Gothorita, and I actually did use Payback this time, taking it below half health. I go for another one the next turn and take that out as well. He sends out his Hatina next, which I probably pronounced wrong, but it doesn't matter because it's a piece of trash that I'm never going to use anyway. And he goes for a Confusion. It only does a little bit of damage to Eevee, and I use Sand Attack to lower its accuracy. The next turn it hits me anyway with Confusion, taking me lower than half health. Luckily, I farmed for Citrus Berries before this, which heals Eevee back up to 32 HP. I used Covert next, which I was hoping would be a 2-hit KO, but it doesn't look like it will be. I think we can survive 2 more Confusions, and we outspeed, so I go for another Covert, and then he goes for another Confusion. Squanchy's getting pretty low now. After a critical hit, he goes down to 6 HP, and I know we outspeed, but I go for a quick attack anyway, just in case. I knew this would probably do enough damage, but it's still a bit of a twitchy moment anyway. He managed to feint it, and beat Bede. It's fine, he wasn't really trying that hard anyway. Next up, our new encounter is a Pancham. This is actually pretty good, since fighting and dark type is something that we're missing from our team. I call in Beta 7, and I head back into the Galar Mine. This is one of the only places in the game where there aren't random encounters, so I made sure that I picked a good one. I went for a Carkol. There were some decent options in here, but I thought this would be the best bet since the first gym's grass. I name him Gearhead, and then head towards the first gym. We've still got one more encounter we can make before we get there, and it's a Milcery. This is pretty good, but we won't be able to evolve it for quite a while. I nickname it Tinkles, and that's going to be a decent fairy type for our team. In theory, Milo should be an absolute cakewalk considering we've got a Carkol and a Raboot. Flame Charge is going to be a 2-hit KO on Gossifleur, and it's going to raise our speed by 2 points. I'm not 100% sure if Gearhead's going to be able to outspeed, so I thought this was the best move to use. My plan is to raise his speed up so that when I Dynamax next turn, I can hit his Elder Gloss with a fire type Dynamax move pretty much immediately and hopefully take it out in one hit, if not two. Doesn't really go to plan as I only do about a third of his health, but I do set up the Sunlight, meaning next turn will do even more damage. He uses a max overgrowth, which I don't think is going to do too much to Gearhead, and it only does a tiny little bit. Still got 2 turns of Dynamax left, and I'm hoping it's going to be enough to take him down. He uses Sun boosted Max Flare next turn, and it does way more damage than the first one, knocking him into the red. I'll go for another one next turn, and finish him off on my last Dynamax move. That's the end of Milo, and that means we've got our first badge. On the way to Nessa, we have another encounter, and this time it's a Nuzlocke. This is going to be excellent, especially right before the water gym. We nickname him K Michael, and I immediately evolve him using a leaf stone that I found in the wild area. Having a fully evolved grass type right before the water gym is going to be absolutely excellent. Can't wait to use Shiftry, as it's one of the Pokemon that I've never really used but I've always really liked. At the daycare centre we get our next gift Pokemon. It's a poison electric Toxel and we give it the nickname Morty. Next up we've got another fight with this idiot. He leads with his Wooloo again and we use double kick to take it out in one move. I mean technically two, but it's one move. He's evolved his Rookedy now just to rub salt in the wound, and he's got a Corvisquire. We get a critical hit on our first flame charge, and then the second one takes it out. This also means that we've had 2 speed boosts ready for his next Pokemon. Since we're still super effective, I go for another flame charge, getting a 3rd speed boost and taking it below half health. He just throws using round, which doesn't really do any damage at all, and I go for one more flame charge to finish him off. The only encounter we can get in Hulbury is a fishing encounter, so we do it and we get a Chinchou. This could be quite useful later on, being water and electric type. We nickname it S-Pibbles, and it's time for the water gym. I wanted to evolve Jerry before I went there, just because he has Seed Bomb, and it could come in handy. Having a Greedent would mean that it'd be a little bit more tanky as well. We go up against Nessa, and of course I start with K Michael the Shiftry. He's got Leaf Tornado, which is going to absolutely obliterate this gym, and her Arrokuda goes down in one hit. Her next Pokemon is her Dreadnought, and this is her ace. She decides to Dynamax, and so do I, creating this absolute nightmare fuel. We go for a max overgrow and take the Dreadnought out in one hit. This has to be the easiest gym battle I've ever had. Don't know why it's taken me so long to use a Shiftry, but I'm glad I've got one for this run. With 2 badges down, this next encounter is one that we actually get to pick, since there's no random encounters in this cave either. I go for a Noibat and nickname it Bird Person. Come out the other side of the Gala Mines and we find a Pawniard. Steel type could come in really handy for the fairy gym later. I nickname him Frank, and then we evolve Flippy Nips into Gyarados. Now if you thought 2 rivals was enough, you were sorely mistaken, my friend. It is time for a battle with Marnie, who is probably the most pointless rival with the most pointless enemy team behind her. With the embarrassment that is Team Yell behind her, she sends out her Krogunk, and I use my Rabu. For some reason, I just went for Flame Charge, even though Double Kick would have been super effective, so I'm not really sure why I did that. And to be honest, I probably should have just stayed in here and used Double Kick on Scraggy, but I decided to swap into Gyarados as well. Yes, I did get the Intimidate off, but I'm not really sure what I was thinking in this battle. It was kind of a weird one, and I could have quite easily lost team members here. There's definitely still gaps in my knowledge, and looking back on hindsight, at least I'm learning things. I go for a Waterfall, and it does well over half damage. Takes him all the way down to the red, as he just goes for a weak low kick. I outspeed and go for another Waterfall, taking out her Scraggy. She sends in more Pekka again, and I definitely should have switched here, but for some reason I just went for Ice Beam and hoped for the best. I think I forgot that it was an electric type, and a Thunder Shock very nearly punished me for that mistake, especially as it was a critical hit. We hit Gyarados down to 4 HP, and luckily with the Citrus Berry he gets a little bit of HP back. Unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be able to keep him in here, especially with how little Ice Beam did. So it's going to have to be a switch here. I send in Toxel expecting him to use another Thunder Shock, and that's exactly what he did. Did basically nothing, and this means that I got a free switch. The only problem is I hadn't really thought this far ahead, and I don't really have any moves on Toxel, so it's kind of pointless having him anyway. We very nearly get taken out by a bite as he knocks us down into 8 HP. We go for an acid, and just as I expected, it does basically nothing, meaning that that free switch was pointless. I switch out to Tinkles, who gets hit with a quick attack. It doesn't really do too much. My plan here is to go for a super effective Drain Kiss, getting our HP back. Goes for a critical hit, bite, and gets the flinch. This is absolutely devastating. I really don't know what's going on here. We switch out to Bird Person, going for a super effective X-Scissor, and he outspeeds with a bite, taking Bird Person out. This is honestly my favourite nickname that I was saving for a Pokemon that I really wanted, which is why I had it on Noibat. Kind of devastating to lose Noibat here, but at least we get a free switch back into Rick. I seem to have put my brain on now, and I actually use Double Kick, finally, which is super effective against all of her team. She goes for a bite, surprisingly doesn't get a flinch, even though it seems like every time she uses it she gets one. And yes, I'm fully having a tantrum right now, but I only have myself to blame. If I just kept Raboot in and used Double Kick over and over, I probably could have wiped her entire team. Unfortunately, my mistake led to Noibat being released, and we lose the nickname Bird Person. What a shame. Kabu looks like the kind of dad that takes Little League a little bit too seriously. It's time for his fire types. He sends in his Ninetales, and I send in Flippy Nips. I know for a fact that he's going to use Will-O-Wisp here because he always does and gets the burn. This lowers my attack, meaning I shouldn't use a physical move. So obviously I go for a physical Waterfall. Even though I have a special type move in Scald, I still went to Waterfall, and I'm not really sure why I don't learn from my mistakes. Luckily I don't really get punished for this one. He sends in his Arcanine next, and I decide to Dynamax early because I want to take this thing out in one hit. I go for a Max Geyser, and I made sure that I used a special type one this time. I'm not sure if it affects these Dynamax moves by which one you use, but it does tell you whether it's physical or not, so I went for the other one just in case. I take out the Arcanine in one hit, and set up the other reason why I Dynamaxed early. We set up the Rain, meaning that the next Max Geyser is going to have boosted damage, so I can hit his Center Scourge with a boosted Max Geyser first move. This takes him below half health, meaning he's only going to get one chance to hit Gyarados. He goes for a Max Flutterby, and it does absolutely nothing. We only have one more Dynamax move left, but I'm thinking that's all we're going to need. We get hit by the burn, taking barely any damage, and we go for Max Geyser again. This is also rain boosted still, so hopefully this is going to be enough to take him out. I don't know if someone can explain to me how this wasn't enough to finish the Center Scorch off, but for some reason he just went into the red and managed to get another turn. It shouldn't be too much of a problem since it's a fire type move anyway, so I don't think it's going to do too much damage, and I think it does about 10. It's kind of annoying, but not really a big problem. This means it's the end of our Dynamax moves, but we do still outspeed, so I'm going to go for another water type move from Gyarados, and it means that we won't have to switch. Since we're still affected by the burn, I go for Scald instead of Waterfall, and that's more than enough to finish off the Center Scorch. We got a critical hit, not that we actually needed it, and Kabu has a little tantrum on the floor. We evolve Toxtricity straight after this match, before we've even got the badge, and make our way over to Hammerlock. This is actually the town with the final gym in it, but we're not going to fight it yet. Instead, we're going to head over to the right and find the Strawberry Sweet. I attach it to my Milcery, and we do a little spin to evolve it into Alcremie. After a little bit of story stuff, we head out from Hammerlock and head towards the 4th gym. On our way there, we can get another encounter, and we find a Silcobra. This is kind of useful, but not really. We're just going to put it in the PC for now. We give it the nickname Summer, and send it off. There's a random double battle here, and Tinkles gets very close to being knocked out just after we've evolved it. Luckily, I managed to get through the fight and go over here to get our next Skiff Pokemon. This is the fossil Pokemon, Octozolt, And I did try and give it a nickname, but I'm not really sure what happened, so it's just going to be Octozolt the Octozolt. I'm guessing most of you have probably guessed the theme for now, but I'm going to leave it up to you guys to figure it out. I head a little bit further than the next gym so that I can grab a Morgrem from the Fairy Forest, since this is going to be super useful against the fighting gym. I nickname him Poopy BH, and as you guys saw before, I evolved Dottler into a Orbeetle as well. We head over to the fighting gym, and B starts with her Hitmontop. I know full well not to underestimate her, since she absolutely decimated my team in the last run. I start with Alcremie, and I decide to go for Acid Armor. My plan is to build my defense up, and luckily she starts with a counter, which fails because I didn't even use an attacking move. I go for another Acid Armor since the first one was free, and this raises our defense up to 4 points. She goes for Revenge this time, and it does absolutely pitiful damage. I decide to go for one more Acid Armor to max it out, and hopefully it should be a clean run from here. My plan is to go for Draining Kiss and heal up any of the little damage that she can do to me. Hopefully this can get me all the way to her final Pokemon, and I can Dynamax along with it and finish it off. Pretty happy with the way the team's looking right now. We've got a wide range of different types, and we've got some powerful units in the team. We're also in a position where if I do lose a team member, like a water type, electric or fairy, we've got a backup in the PC to replace it. After taking out her Hitmontop, her Pangoro, and her Surfetched, our Alcremie is still at full health, and it's still got +6 defense. With Alcremie now Dynamaxed, this has turned what should be a really scary Dynamax Machamp into something that really isn't too much of a problem whatsoever. He keeps hitting us with Max Strike, which does basically nothing, and 2 Max Starfalls is enough to finish off B and grab our 4th badge. It's now been a full 5 minutes since a rival fight, so it's time to take on Bede again. I absolutely destroy his entire team with crunches from Gyarados, so I didn't even bother showing this. It was just too easy. We head over to the Fairy Town, and it's time for the Fairy Gym. There are a few pretty strong trainers in the gym challenge here, but luckily we didn't lose any team members, even though one of them had a Gardevoir, which was pretty dangerous. Gyarados did level up, and I made a decision which could come back to haunt me. I decided not to teach it Dragon Dance, because I feel like Gyarados is already pretty overpowered, and teaching it Dragon Dance would just make this a little bit too easy. It's time for our fight with Opal, and I decided to start with Morty, since he's a poison type, and he's going to be super effective against her team. To be honest, it probably would have been better, in hindsight, to use Morty a little bit later on, since he's not going to do too much damage to her Weezing, and her second Pokemon is a Mawile, which is Steel type. At least in this gym, you get the bonus of being asked these questions that give you a stat boost. The answer to the first question is the Wizard, and it gives you a nice little speed boost. Next turn, I decide to go for Spark, since Venoshock isn't doing too much, and it does about the same. Meanwhile, her Weezing keeps going for Sludge, and doing not too much damage. I go for another Spark to finish it off, and it was at this point that I realised I probably should have started with a different Pokemon. Her Weezing goes back and she sends out her Mawile. We get hit with its Intimidate, and for some reason I used Venoshock, which doesn't affect Mawile. I'm not really sure what I was thinking there, but that was a pretty silly mistake. Anyway, it's time for another question, and you'd think the answer's pink, but it's actually purple. We get a defensive boost this time, and I'd probably switch out here, but considering I've got so many stat boosts already, I don't really want to waste them, so I decide to go for Spark, and hope that she doesn't do too much damage to me. Does about a third, and if I'd used Spark the first time, she'd probably be in the low orange now. She set up an Iron defense, raising her defense, and I go for a Spark. This time it doesn't do too much, but we do get the paralyze off. She uses a weak crunch, but Morty's getting very low now, and I think it's time to switch. I decided to send Frank in here, since he's a Steel type, and would be super effective against her fairies, and I'm also not too fussed about losing him. I decided that if he's going to go down here, then he's going to go down, and at least I get a free switch into another Pokemon. Unfortunately, she had a Draining Kiss, which means that every single time I do a little bit of damage to her, she does twice as much back and heals. For the next question, you've got to tell her she's 18, even though she's like 600, and then you get an attack and a special attack boost. I don't think it's going to be enough to do more damage than she's healing for, but at this point I don't really want to do it switch anyway, so I'm just going to keep using Metal Claw. Of course it misses, because why wouldn't it? And she goes for another Draining Kiss, healing even more. She's probably going to have her more while back up to full health by the time I switch to another Pokemon. But we go for another Metal Claw anyway. It does actually do a decent amount of damage now, and if we'd hit the last one, she'd probably be in the low half of her health. But she heals up above half from that Draining Kiss, and I get a free switch into my next Pokemon. I go for Cinderace, since it's super effective with the Fire type against her Steel, and we use a Pyro Ball, taking it out in one hit. Her next Pokemon is an absolute menace, a Togekiss. This thing's really dangerous, and I know it has Air Cutter, so I want to switch out. I decide my best bet is to switch into Flippy Nips, since I don't really have anything else that can take a hit. It uses an Ancient Power to start, and of course gets the Omni Boost. This is really unlucky and quite unfortunate, to be honest. I don't remember the last time I've used that move and actually got the Omni Boost, so I think it's like 10% chance to happen. She uses it again the next turn and doesn't get the boost this time, luckily. I go for an Ice Beam, and I'm really hoping this will freeze. It doesn't. It is super effective, but it doesn't really do any damage. I'm forced to switch out here, and I make a pretty dumb mistake. I decide to go for K. Michael, and I've forgotten that this thing has Air Cutter, which could quite easily take him out in one hit. Even Ancient Power's doing extra damage because of that Omni Boost. I don't even really know what I was planning to do here. Even if I used Rollout, which I'm pretty sure is super effective since it's Flying type, I would have been locked in, and I would have almost definitely lost K. Michael. She goes for an Air Cutter and outspeeds, which I really should have predicted, and I've lost one of my strongest team members. This is really annoying, and that's the second death of this fight. I decide I've got to send in Tinkles and go for a Fairy type of my own. This is where a little bit of planning and preparation would have come in really handy, because if I had saved my Toxtricity for this point, I could have quite easily taken this Togekiss down, or at least hit it with a Toxic. It goes for an Air Cutter straight away, and does a massive amount of damage. I go for a Dazzling Gleam, and I don't even get it below half. I don't really know what I'm going to do here, so I've just got to pick another move, and hope for the best. I Dynamax to try and get some extra damage, and I go for a Max Mind Storm. My only other options were Max Starfall, which is Fairy type anyway, or Max Guard, which would have just wasted one of my Dynamax turns. I did about half of what he had left, and I'm thinking one more would be enough to take it down. I'm really hoping it is, because this thing's gonna kill me otherwise. It uses Air Slash and takes me out before I even get a chance to deal another hit. That's a waste of my Dynamax, and another team member down. She's taken 3 out now. My only option is to send in Rick and hope that I outspeed. I don't, and she goes for an Ancient Power, doing massive damage. At least now I can hit back with a Pyro Ball, which should hopefully take this thing down finally. It does, but unfortunately she still has her ace, an Alcremie of her own, which has a Gigantamax form, and it's level 38. Meaning this is the strongest level Pokemon I've fought yet. My entire team's hanging on by a thread, and unfortunately, even though a Pyro Ball does massive damage, it's not enough to take it down. It hits back with its signature move, and even though it's not very effective, it takes Rick down and heals a little bit of its health back. This is really bad, but hopefully if I can outspeed this thing, I can take it down with Morty and finish this off. I have enough team members in the PC to fully replace my team and still have a team of 6 going forward, so as long as I can take this thing down, I still have a chance at this Nuzlocke. It might not be as strong as the team that I brought into this gym, but I can definitely make it work. A Venoshock isn't enough to finish her off, which means Morty's going down too, but by some miracle, he manages to hold on with 1 HP. He toughs it out so I wouldn't feel bad, which just proves this is why he's the main character. Don't think she's healed back as much as she had before, so hopefully this Venoshock will be enough to finish her off. I really don't want to lose Morty here, as he's probably my best team member now. I do still have Gyarados, and I'm not sure what I'm going to replace the other team members with. I'm going to have a look, but for now, we get our 5th gym badge, and we've only got 3 more to go. It's time for the biggest release session we've had so far. We get rid of Cinderace, we get rid of Pawniard, we get rid of Shiftry, and we get rid of Alcremie. That is devastating, but at least we've got replacements. I'm adding Beta 7 the Pangoro, Gearhead the Colossal, Poopy BH the Morgarem, and we're bringing back good old C. Daniels. He's now an Orbeetle. This team's actually pretty good, and it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Of course, it's time to fight this numpty, and he sends out his new Trevenant. I decide to start with Flippy Nips, since I've now got Crunch, and I can get an Intimidate off. Trevenant is a special attacker, but every little helps. You're not losing your mind, I have sped this up, and he goes for a Confuse Ray after I do a really powerful Crunch. He heals back up with a Hyper Potion, and I'm going for Crunch again. Break through the confusion, and this one does even more than the first one, but it's still not quite enough to take it down. I click Crunch again, and we break through the confusion once again. This was enough to take down his Trevenant, and he sends in his Bolton next. I might be making some stupid mistakes, but I'm not keeping Gyarados in for this one since I know he's going to use an electric move. I switch to Gearhead, and I go for Ancient Power, just to see if I can get the Omni Boost this time. It hits pretty hard, and I don't get the boost. I switch to Beta 7 since I don't think I'm going to be able to take this thing down, and it just goes for a weak Crunch. It does get a defense drop on me, but I can go for a Zen Headbutt next, and finish it off. Next up is his Snorlax, and I've got the Vital Throw, which is going to be super effective. He goes for a Stockpile, raising his special defense and his normal defense, and Vital Throw does just under half. He goes for another Stockpile, and I go for another Vital Throw. I'm not expecting as much damage this time since his defense has gone up so much. He decides to throw and just go for another Stockpile, so this Snorlax was really easily taken out. One more Vital Throw is enough to finish it off, and it's time for his next Pokemon. I'm actually surprised at how good this Pangoro is. I don't really know why I didn't think it was going to be very good, but it was. Next up is his Heatmore, which is absolutely free since Flippy Nip still has full HP. I've got the Rocky Helmet on him, so he takes a little bit of damage from that, and I go for a Scald, almost finishing him off. Goes for another physical move, knowing full well that I've got a Rocky Helmet, but I mean his trainer is Hop after all, so what can you expect? I go for another Scald, finishing it off, and for his final Pokemon, which is his starter, I switch to Orbeetle to use a Psychic type move against him. He hits super hard with a knockoff, nearly taking Orbeetle out in one hit, and Zen Headbutt does basically nothing. It may not have been necessary, but I decided to sacrifice C. Daniels here to get a clean swap into Morty. This is his last Pokemon, and as long as I can get a Toxic off, I can just keep switching until he dies. His knockoff doesn't even do half health, so I decide that I can actually go for a Venoshock next turn. For those of you that don't know, if you use Venoshock when a Pokemon's already poisoned, it does double the damage that it would have normally done. This means he's going to get hit with a double damage, super effective Venoshock, and take damage from the Toxic afterwards. We get a critical hit on top of that, so we don't even need the Toxic damage after, and we finish Hop off. Unfortunately, we've got to say goodbye to C. Daniels, which is a bit of a shame. We're going to put in Arctozolt the Arctozolt as our new team member, and do a little bit of training to bring everyone back up. In a Nuzlocke, there's a thing called Species Clause, which means if you find another Pokemon that you've already got, you can have another look and try and find something different. My first encounter was a Toxel, and obviously we've already got Morty the Toxtricity, so I had another look and I found a Meowstic. I decided to call this one Beth, and I headed to the next area. We can get another encounter here, and Species Clause comes into effect again since we find a Sandacobra. We've actually already got the first evolved form, but it still counts. I find a Rhydon as my second encounter and catch that instead. We call this one Golden Fold and move on. I had something really unfortunate happen at the end of this area where I ran into these two trainers that are actually optional trainers and I didn't even need to fight them. Kind of annoying since I lost a team member here, but what can you do? Unfortunately, in Nuzlocke, just sometimes annoying stuff happens. I released Gearhead, who was my only fire type, so I had to teach Flamethrower to Goldenfold, just in case. We evolved Chinchou and Morgren, and we also evolved Goldenfold's the Raihan into a Rhydon. It's now time for the 6th gym, and this is the Stone type gym with Gordie. He starts with Viv's Barbarical, and I start with Beth since I've got a Psychic type move to use against him. We hit him with Psychic, and it does just about half health. This is really good. I wasn't actually expecting it to do that much since Meowstic isn't really that great of a Pokemon. It retaliates with a Razor Shell and absolutely destroys Beth. That was a one-hit KO on her debut fight. How unfortunate. We send in S-Pibbles the Lantern next, and I'm not really sure what I can do here, so I end up just opting for a Bubble Beam and hoping that'll do enough damage to take this thing out. It hits with a Razor Shell, which does an absolute ton of damage considering it's a water type move against the water type Pokemon. Bubble Beam isn't quite enough, and he takes down Lantern as well. I switch into Flippy Nips the Gyarados, and Razor Shell is really absolutely destroying my team. I don't know how he's doing so much damage. Luckily it's a physical move, so Rocky Helmet finishes it off. He sends in his Shuffle now, and this should be an easy KO with Waterfall. We hit it once, and it goes for a Rock Tomb. This does a decent amount of damage since it's super effective. I decided the best move here was to switch out to something while I was still fighting a pretty weak Pokemon. I didn't really want to have to do the switch in his Stojurner, which is going to be really strong. I switch into Rhydon since I know he's going to go for a Rock Tomb, and I don't think it's going to do very much. It only did 3 damage, which was even less than I was expecting. My plan here is to just keep going for Hammer Arm. It's not the most accurate move, so I'm hoping for the best here and hoping that I don't miss. I managed to hit the first one and take his Shuffle off, and now it's his Stojurner. It goes for Wonder Room, and I know I could probably look it up, but I didn't actually bother, and I couldn't read it as quickly as it came up, so I don't even know what that move does, but it did something. And next move he sets up a Stealth Rock, which is not great considering I'm probably going to get hurt if I switch out. As long as I can keep hitting these Hammer Arms, I should actually be able to take him down without switching, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. We finish off his Stojurner, and his Colossal comes in. He's going to Gigantamax this, which is his last Pokemon, so I'm going to Dynamax too. This turns my move into Max Knuckle, and I think it actually raises the accuracy. He hits me with Max Flare, which is really not going to do very much, and I think we got this one in the bag. He sets up the Sun with that, meaning his next fire attack's going to do more damage, and I think it's going to take more than one of these Max Knuckles to take him out. We don't even do half with one, and this is not looking great now. Thankfully there's not a lot that he can really do back, so hopefully we can just outplay him now. I decided to try Max Quake next turn to see if it did more damage, and it actually did, surprisingly. Finished him off, so I probably should have just used that in the first place. With his whole team defeated, that's 6 badges, and we've only got 2 more to go now. Next up is Piers, and he's going to be a little bit of a problem. It's time to say goodbye to Lantern and Meowstic, but at least now I've got a chance to get new team members. What was once a very full box is starting to get pretty low, and if I keep losing team members at this rate, I'm not going to have a full team of 6. I decide to go fishing in this area, and I catch an Octillery. I nickname it Scroopy, and this guy must be having an absolute laugh if he wants to battle me again. Have I not embarrassed you enough yet? Honestly, this guy doesn't even deserve another commentary. I feel like I've described the way that I've destroyed his entire team a few too many times now. Let's just watch him in super high speed get absolutely wrecked. Once I take down Piers, who's the next gym, which is Dark type, I've got the Dragon type gym as the last one. I have quite a few Ice type moves, and I've even got Arctozolt, the Arctozolt, who's an Ice type, so I'm not too concerned about that gym. As long as we can get through Piers and the next rival fight with Marnie, we shouldn't have too much trouble with the last gym. After that, it's just the Elite Four, and then I've pretty much finished the game, so fingers crossed. I can actually do this one. This will be the first Nuzlocke that I've ever completed, and this is already the furthest I've ever got, so I'm super happy with this run so far. As you can see, we've completely decimated his entire team, and his Corviknight is the last Pokemon he's got left. I've got Raihan out, and a couple of Rock Blasts later, we finish it off, and I think that's the last we're going to hear from this guy for a bit. After our last encounter with Marnie, I'm a little bit nervous about this fight. I decided to start with Flippy Nip since he's our strongest Pokemon and her Lipard is a physical attacker, so our Rocky Helmet's going to do some damage and our Intimidate is going to lower her attack. As you can see, I've planned this one out a little bit better than last time. I've also taught him Earthquake, so this should do a lot of damage to her team. She sets up with a nasty block, which could be dangerous if I don't take this thing out quickly. We hit the first Earthquake and I'm really hoping for a one-hit KO here. We get it with a critical hit. I'm not sure if I would have got it without that critical hit, so I'm actually quite happy with that one. Next up is her Morpeko, and I know I'm going for Earthquake again. I don't know why, I wasn't thinking, but this thing's an electric type. How do I keep getting this? We get a little bit of damage off with the Rocky Helmet, but I can't believe I've just let Gyarados die like that. That is so ridiculous. Even when I was watching this back, it didn't even occur to me that it would use an electric move. This is the lesson that I'm really going to have to keep in mind for future runs, because this Morpeko has caused me a lot of trouble. I decided to send Golden Fold in next and go for a Drill Run. This is super effective and it's a little bit more accurate than Hammer Arm, so I decided to go for that one instead. We hit with the Drill Run and this Morpeko's taken out. That thing's a real nuisance. I'm going to have to keep that one in mind. Next up is her Scrafty, and I'm going to go for Hammer Arm on this one. As long as it actually hits, this should probably take it out in one hit. It goes for a Swagger, which is kind of annoying, but at least I get the attack boost, and if I can break through this confusion and hit the Hammer Arm, I can definitely take this thing out. We break through, but we miss. I try and go for Hammer Arm again, but I can't use the same move twice in a row. I decide our best bet is to switch out, so I send in Scroopy the Octillery instead. He just uses Scary Face, which isn't really going to cause us too many issues, since I think we weren't going to outspeed this anyway. I've got a lot of super effective moves here, and I think my best bet is to just go for Energy Ball, since Hydro Pump could potentially miss. Goes for Swagger again, which is really irritating, especially as now we're not using physical moves and we're not even going to benefit from the attack boost. Luckily we break through the confusion and hit with an Energy Ball. It didn't really do as much as I was hoping, so I decide next turn I'm going to go for Hydro Pump instead. He goes for another Scary Face, which is completely pointless because we definitely don't outspeed him this time. And I hope that we're going to break through this confusion. We do, and we hit the Hydro Pump again. This has actually been really lucky, and we've been pretty unlucky for the whole run, so I'm quite happy with this. I decide to go for a Scald to finish him off. Marnie has other plans and uses a Hyper Potion to fully heal it. Hopefully, as long as we can break through the confusion again, we can get a little bit of damage off. We do, and we hit the Scald. I'm hoping for the burn here to lower its attack, but we don't get it. I think one more Hydro Pump's going to be enough to finish it off, and he just goes for Scary Face again. I don't know what his obsession with lowering my speed is, even though I'm already slower than him, but each to their own. We don't get lucky for a fourth time, and we manage to hit ourselves in confusion. Goes for a Crunch, and I don't think it's going to be enough to finish off Scroopy, and we should break through the confusion this time. We finally snap out of it and go for Hydro Pump. The Hydro Pump hits for a massive amount of damage and nearly finishes off the Scrafty. I'm going to have to switch now because I don't think we can take another Crunch. I'm not really sure what to switch into, so I decide to just go for Golden Fold, just in case. I know Crunch isn't going to do much to him, so it's pretty much a free switch. It does a little bit more than I expected, to be fair, but I can go for Drill Run now, which should be enough to finish the Scrafty off, and it's more accurate than Hammer Arm, which is super effective anyway. He goes for a Brick Break, which I didn't even know he had, and does massive damage. That could have easily taken Raihan out. Luckily, we hit the Drill Run and finish off our Scrafty. The final Pokemon is a Toxicroak. and I used the absolute genius move of switching to my fairy type, which is weak against poison. I seem to remember this in my head, just thinking, oh, fighting type's weak to fairy, and completely disregarding the fact that he's poison. I opt for a draining kiss to try and get a little bit of health back after he hits me, and he just goes for swagger anyway. I'm getting kind of annoyed with this move. It's really irritating being confused all the time, especially when I'm not using physical moves and don't benefit from the attack boost anyway. We land a critical hit from the draining kiss, and I'm not 100%, but I think one more might be enough to finish this thing off. He hits with a poison jab, and I think it was that moment that I realised that I messed up. We managed to hit ourselves in confusion because, of course, and Poopy BH is finished. That means I've lost 2 team members to a rival fight, which is not ideal really, and I'm running out of options to replace them with, especially viable options that are actually going to be useful in the late game. There's also not that many encounters left for me to get, so I'm going to have to be really careful going forward. I send in Morty to try and finish him off, and he hits me with a sucker punch. Doesn't do too much, and an overdrive's enough to finish off her Toxicroak. This is the end of her Pokemon, and another rival fight done. After replacing the team members that I lost, I head straight over to Piers, and this just feels like another Marnie fight as he starts with Scrafty again. I start with Scroopy, and I'm not really sure what to do here. It would have been really nice to still have Gyarados. I decide to go for a Hydro Pump as he hits me with a Brick Break. It does big damage, but I added a Citrus Berry to Scroopy before this fight, and he heals up for a decent amount. I should be able to tank another one of those, so I hit with a Hydro Pump, and I think I'm going to go for another one the next turn. I don't quite do half his health, and so I decide to go for Scald instead. He hits me with another Brick Break, and we survive it nicely. Scald hits, and manages to take it out with a critical hit. That was really lucky. I am going to have to switch now, and he sends in his Malamar. I switched to Morty, and I had to actually look up whether Toxic is effective against Malamar, because for some reason I felt like it just wasn't going to affect it. I managed to hit the Toxic, and next turn we're going to go for a Venoshock to try and take this thing out. He hits us with a Foul Play, doing well over half. We've got another Citrus Berry, bringing us back up again. He is doing quite big damage to us, but I feel like this fight's going pretty well so far. I flick Venoshock, and I'm really hoping this does big damage. It's going to be double effective since we poisoned him last turn. With the Toxic Chip, that should be enough to take it out. He retaliates with Psycho Cut, and it gets a critical hit. To be honest, I think that probably would have taken Morty out even without the critical, but that is very unfortunate. Poison Chip also wasn't enough to take Malamar out. I send in Arctozolt the Octozolt, and he outspeeds. Hits us with a hard Foul Play, doesn't quite do half damage, and Ice Beam's enough to finish off his Malamar. He's got an Obstagoon next, and this thing could be kind of annoying. I decide to go for Freeze Dry since there's a good chance that it'll freeze. He protects on the first turn, so I just go for it again next turn. He hits with a Throat Chop, which does a decent amount of damage, but another Citrus Berry brings us back up to around half health. We manage to hit the Freeze Dry this turn, and it does actually a decent amount of damage. The main thing here though, is it gets the freeze. This is excellent, as I can just keep spamming Ice Beam now, and just hope that he stays frozen. I hit the first one, bringing him down into the orange, and he stays frozen. We hit another Ice Beam, and one more after this should be enough to take him out. We just need him not to thaw out this time. And he stays frozen. That's excellent, that couldn't have gone better. We managed to do one more Ice Beam and finish off his Obstagoon, leaving just his Ace. His Ace is a Stun Tank, and I decide to send in Golden Fold to try and kill him with a Hammer Arm. He uses Sucker Punch, which means I get a free swap, and I go for Hammer Arm next. For some reason, there's no Dynamax in this gym fight, but that's kind of okay, because I didn't really want to go against a Dynamax Stun Tank, to be honest. We miss our first Hammer Arm, which is kind of annoying, but he goes for a Screech next turn. As long as we hit this Hammer Arm, that Screech shouldn't be too much of an issue. but if we miss again, it could be a problem. We land the hammer arm, and it falls just short of doing half of its health. We also get a speed drop. That's not too much of a problem as we didn't outspeed anyway. Luckily, he just goes for a toxic. I assumed he was going to use a physical type move considering he used Screech last turn. We managed to hit our next hammer arm again, and he's now into the red. One more hit from any move should probably take this thing down. Take a bit of chip from the toxic damage, and it's time to switch. Set in Arctozolt the Arctozolt as he just goes for Sucker Punch again, giving me a free switch. This Ice Beam should finish him off, and he decides to throw the whole match by just using Screech. He lowers our defense for absolutely no reason, and the final Ice Beam finishes off his Skuntank. I'm really glad Arctozolt's still alive after that fight, as we're going to need the Ice type for the Dragon Gym next. That's our 7th badge, and there's only one more to go before the league. I released Summer and Morty, and I'm now down to 5 team members. I don't have a full team for the first time since the start of the run, and I decided to bring in Tammy and evolve her into a Manectric. It's time for Raihan's Dragons, so I start with Octillery and Arctozolt, since both of them have Ice Beam. And I also know that he has a Gigalith that he starts with, which means Octillery could actually use Water type moves, which are super effective as well. His Flygon manages to set up a Sandstorm, which could be kind of irritating since it's so early on in the fight. I was hoping that this Ice Beam would do about half, but I actually managed to get the one-hit KO. It's crazy how strong Ice is against Dragon when it's just so useless against everything else. I opted for an Energy Ball against the Gigalith, and unfortunately that didn't quite do half damage. He goes for a Body Press on Arctozolt, which does quite a lot. I decide to Dynamax my Octillery next turn, and Raihan takes Arctozolt out. That's really unfortunate. He doesn't actually have that many Dragon-type Pokemon for a Dragon-type Gym Leader, and a Max Overgrow is more than enough to take his Sandaconda out. This also sets up a little bit of healing, which should counteract the Sandstorm. Not really sure what I'm going to send in to replace Arctozolt, so I just go for Jerry, since he's a little bit of a tank and I don't really care if he dies. He sends in his Ace Duraludon and Gigantamaxes it. A Max Knuckle isn't even enough to take half of Jerry's health, which is surprising. I actually thought Greedent was going to be kind of useless, but after seeing that, he could be quite good for the rest of this run. I go for a Max Overgrowth to try and finish off this Gigalith, and it does. This brings him down to just his Duraludon, which means it's a 2v1 from here on out. He goes for another Max Knuckle, and this time it takes Jerry out. That's kind of annoying. I don't know why it took him out considering how little it did last turn. I guess because he got the attack boost it was enough to take him out. We go for a Max Hailstorm next, which should be super effective. We hit Duraludon for massive damage, and now instead of Sandstorm it sets up the Hail. One more of those should be more than enough to finish Raihan off, so whatever I send in now doesn't really matter, as long as Octillery can survive. Didn't realise that was the last of Octillery's Gigantamax turns, so I'm going to have to rely on Ice Beam instead. I go for a Thunder Fang from Tammy, not that it's going to do much. He goes for Max Rockfall. This is really bad, as it hits Octillery and takes him out before he can even use his Ice Beam. Thunder Fang's really not going to do much, so this is really not good. I'm going to have to send in Golden Fold the Rhydon and probably just go for Flamethrower, which will be super effective since Duraludon's Steel type. Thunderfang does basically nothing, but at least that's the end of his Gigantamax turns. He hits for a massive Iron Head, nearly taking out Golden Fold in one hit, as we go for another Thunderfang and a Flamethrower. I'm praying that this Flamethrower finishes this battle, and with a bit of luck, it does. That's 8 gym badges. It's actually crazy that I've got this far, but unfortunately with just 2 Pokemon left, it's not looking good from here. I say goodbye to Octillery, Arctozolt and Greedent, and it's time to head to the next area. At least I can get one more encounter here. But even with 3 Pokemon, I don't think I can take the league. Our encounter here is a Beratic, which is actually really, really good. But unfortunately, Golden Fog gets hit with a Blizzard and gets taken out by a wild Pokemon. That is actually depressing. We do manage to catch the Beratic, but it's a little bit too late. There's a couple more trainers before we get to the final town, and the first trainer that we go against manages to wipe our entire team. Tammy put up a pretty good fight considering it was a type disadvantage, but in the end, everyone's taken out, and that's the end of the run. I'm super happy with how far I got here. I do want to try this again, and I reckon with a little bit more practice and a little less mistakes, I could actually take it all the way. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and don't forget to subscribe.